One of the biggest myths in freelancing is that you always have to be hunting for your next client. But what if the easiest way to grow your freelance business wasn't finding more clients? What if it simply was being more valuable to the clients that you already have? Now, my biggest and longest running client relationship didn't start with a huge contract or a fancy proposal. It started off with a very simple role. I had no idea that 5 years later, that same relationship would evolve into multiple projects, daily work for me, and one of the most important clients in my business right now. And the interesting part, I got the gig because a manager of a group that I had worked with in the past went to work for another company, and she provided my name as a suggestion when the initial role emerged at her new company. And it was off from there. So if we haven't met, I'm Jennifer, and my goal here is to share different techniques with you on how you can build a successful freelance business. I went all into freelancing a little more than 5 years ago, and I have been able to build a successful six-figure, in some years multi-six-figure freelancing business, and I hope the same for all of you. So let's go back to my story. So early in 2021, I was brought in to support online events featuring certain C-level executives for a very large global company. It was a very sporadic gig, and at this point, I was actually still working as a full-time associate professor when I took on this gig because I have done freelancing on the side for decades. Now, in this role, I worked behind the scenes. Basically, I read audience questions to the executives who were speaking at the meeting, and I managed the back end in Zoom of the participants. Basically, I would mark questions that they answered as answered. I would take people on and off of mute to make sure that I prevented those dreaded hot mic moments. For me, it was a very easy gig because I had survived teaching classes at the college level via Zoom during COVID. And compared to that, this was easy because in these, I wasn't presenting, I wasn't developing strategy, I wasn't managing breakout rooms. I was simply helping to ensure the events ran smoothly and reading the questions off in a professional manner. I could handle that. But I did treat the assignments very seriously. I made sure that I showed up prepared. I made sure that I was always dependable. I paid attention to the small little details to try to make the events as good as they possibly could be. I wanted to ensure that they ran smoothly. Now, I kept doing this for quite a while, but over time, I did start getting involved in additional programs and events because people knew that they could rely on me. So if I was available, I said, sure, I'll help out on those other events. And that's where a lesson really came into play for me at that point. It's that clients really reward freelancers by announcing, congratulations, you're promoted. Instead, they reward us with trust, and trust leads to additional invitations. Invitations that give us additional opportunities. And then those opportunities often look completely different from the work that we originally started doing. And I've learned to embrace that. I actually love that aspect of freelancing. When you look at the path behind you and see how it wasn't necessarily the expected path. So later on, when I decided to leave my full-time gig and go all in with freelancing in the summer of 2021, I became involved in managing this particular company's online event consulting group. Now, this was not something that I pursued. I consider myself a teacher and an educator at heart. I sometimes shy away from certain management opportunities, or I guess I should say I used to shy away from certain management opportunities. I guess that's evolved too, but that's a story for another time. But in this circumstance, I didn't want to manage people. I didn't want the potential headaches. I only took the position after first declining and then having a chat with someone on the team who basically convinced me to move forward in the management role. So it basically just evolved naturally. But as time went on and people got to know me, other opportunities started to come up. People started asking me if I could provide basically occasional project management. They just wanted oversight on some special projects, and they wanted someone who was efficient and organized to do that. So they came to me. The assignments varied greatly. Sometimes I felt like I was in a little bit over my head, but they all worked out, and they all did have one thing in common. And that's that I was given that opportunity that inevitably gave me work and helped me to stretch and grow because someone remembered me, someone who worked with me trusted me, and they knew that I'd get things done. I think that that's one place where, as freelancers, we sometimes underestimate the impact of that, but it's really important. Your reputation becomes your resume. And in this day and age, people like acquiring someone through word of mouth or someone who they've worked with before and had a really positive experience with. They don't necessarily, in my opinion, just look at resumes and check off skills. They hire someone who they know communicates well, follows through, has a certain amount of confidence with what they're doing, and has the ability to solve problems instead of creating them. Now, the story doesn't end there. Now, while I was doing these various roles that I obviously had the ability to do, they weren't my dream freelance gig. I wanted to get more involved with training again. Of course, I was doing some training for other clients, but I really admired the training program that this particular client had, and I wanted to be involved, and I was determined. I set it as a goal. And about 2 years ago, the company happened to launch a Copilot training initiative. Now, at this point, they already knew me because I'd been working with them for several years at this point. And they knew that my background was decades of experience teaching technology-based things. So because I was willing to invest time in learning Microsoft Copilot and I had a proven track record of success with them, I was suddenly able to contribute in an entirely different way. I was able to get on the training team, become one of the company's primary, if not the primary, Copilot trainer. I was able to do what I love and use my training expertise. So this is an opportunity that just opened yet another door for me. And hopefully that's the lesson that you take away from this video, is that when opportunity comes knocking, if it's something that's in your wheelhouse, I highly encourage you to open that door. Because how it's evolved for me is that today I do some work for this client essentially every workday. It's become a steady gig for me all of these years. Now, I'm still in a freelance capacity, which I like. I have some flexibility on when I conduct the trainings, but I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity. So for me, what began with executive events support eventually grew into me managing the online event consulting program, me overseeing some sporadic project management or doing some sporadic project management with certain short-term projects, and eventually developed into me being one of the main Copilot trainers for this company, which is amazing that it all started from that relatively small assignment. So I know that I constantly get asked, because of the success that I've had in my freelance business, how I find so many projects. And honestly, I know I've said this before, I don't spend much time thinking about finding projects. I just focus on doing high quality work and building relationships, and they sort of just show up for me most of the time. Now, I'm not going to be disingenuous and say that I never look for projects. Of course, I sometimes do. But I think that because I prioritize my work and the relationships with the people that I build, that I've been fortunate enough to have a steady stream of work during the years that I did this part-time, and then since I've done it full-time. I'm very thankful for that. And while projects obviously come and go, the relationships just compound over time. And the clients don't wake up and think, oh, I want to hire someone new. They think, who do we already know who could help with this? I know that, when I'm in the process of hiring folks for the online event consulting team, I definitely think, who do I know that could do this? Because I've had less than stellar experiences hiring people who I don't know. I'm not saying that you can't hire someone you don't know and it works out. Of course, you can hire someone you don't know and it can work out very well. But if I start with a known quantity, I've had a little bit better success. Now, in this case, I think that the reason the relationship continued to grow is I never approached it with the mindset of doing only what was assigned. I tried to be as useful as possible. If something needed to be organized, a problem needed to be solved, a project needed oversight, if training was needed, I basically raised my hand and said, I can do it. And of course, I'm not saying yes to everything. If it's out of my wheelhouse, I'm not saying yes, but I'm definitely willing to stretch and grow and evolve. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages that we have as freelancers. We aren't confined to one rigid job description. We can grow alongside our clients. So basically, in summary, your first project with a client is often just the beginning. Many freelancers spend all their energy chasing new clients, but they overlook the opportunities sitting right in front of them. And I think that the highest value work that you're going to get comes from people who already know and trust you. Now, sometimes those opportunities emerge slowly, one project at a time. You can see that it took essentially 3 years, maybe a little bit more, before I ended up in the position that I wanted to be in, but I just kept working away at it, stating my intention, doing good work, and it ended up happening for me. And I believe it can happen for you too. So if this resonated with you, I have a couple other related videos that I think are going to help you in increasing the success of your freelance business. Please check them out. Hope to see you next time. Bye.